In the previous lesson, we learned how to start to use REDSHIFT in Blender, and we started with a really basic setup, but we kind of went through all the main parts of the interface and the main tools of REDSHIFT in Blender. So we saw how we can set up an environment, how to set up a material, and also a couple of lights. Now, in this lesson, we will continue to talk about lighting in REDSHIFT for Cinema 4D. I'm going to start with a new scene, and I also want to point out that if you need any extra help, because this is going to be a really quick course, you can check the REDSHIFT user guides or manual in the actual website. So you'll find all the software that you can use together with REDSHIFT. And if you're interested, there is also a longer course in REDSHIFT for Cinema 4D in the channel. So if you want to check that out, you'll find a lot of extra information. In this video, we're going to cover the lights, and then we're going to talk about materials and render settings. And what we're going to try to do is show you where the most important things are. So let's say you want to work with the lights, you find an entire chapter in the manual about lights. Now let's find a scene that we can use. So I will use something here from Sketchfab. Sketchfab is a website where you can get so many different models, and I'm gonna look for like a tiny home, a tiny house, nothing too big to work with in these projects and to make some examples. So if you have your own project, you can use your own. I'm just going to use this one here called the floating tiny home, which gives us the possibility to work in exterior and in interior, because there are little differences between renderings that are based on exterior lighting and interior lighting. So this one here, you find the author name, the project name, and all the model information right here. Now we can use different types of files. We can use Collada or DAE, or we can use GLTF, which is kind of open source format, containing also usually the materials and the texture. Well, it does work like this in Blender, but we'll see what happens in REDSHIFT. So for example, in Cinema 4D for REDSHIFT, you have a material converter, and here in Blender, I think we don't have it yet. So things could change. So look for kind of a material converter, and if it's not there, you just need to do everything manually. I'm gonna delete everything and import this scene in GLTF first and see if it works with GLTF. Otherwise, I'm gonna go for the DAE. This is what I usually do. I try to use different formats. So this is GLTF, and there is another folder for the texture. And if you're interested in Sketchfab, you'll find also other video guides about Sketchfab and Sketchfab in Blender and how to handle files. You can see this one here is not looking really good. It's either too small or too big, but we don't really see anything. Now there are some fixes we can do, like adjust the camera clipping and things like that, but I'm just gonna go with the other file. So I'm gonna go for the DAE and see if it works better. So I'm going to navigate in the folder here where I saved the file and import it, and there you go. So it's a little bit far from the origin, so we can we need to get closer, and or we can just move everything near the origin, but I don't want to do that. Now in Blender we see the materials, they look fine, so let's try to switch in the redshift render as we learned to do in the previous lesson, and let's see what's happening here. Well, nothing is happening, but we don't have any light, but it's telling me also that I need a camera. So first of all, I'm gonna add a camera. No matter where I'm gonna add it, well, I just need to add a camera. And here everything turns black. Now I have a lot of lights in the file that I don't know if they're actually working. I need to like try to make them redshift lights. So you can see that nothing is happening here. We don't really know what's the problem. So what I'm gonna do is just delete everything, start from the beginning. And actually that's the best way to learn, to have like nothing in the scene except the 3D objects that you see here and the camera, which we need to run first render. So this way we can learn how to work with the lighting. So let's go to add, and let's start to add ourselves the lights. We can use the blender lights. We're gonna use them later. Now I want to use a dome light. Now the dome light, let's see where it went here in the outliner. There you go. The dome light is a light that is going to illuminate everything. Now it's not visible, so something is wrong. You can see it just went into the origin, so it's pretty far from the project, but that doesn't matter because we don't care where we position the dome light. It's going to emit light from every direction towards the center of our scene. So all we need to do is check here if we actually have in the panels, in the parameters, if it's on. And let's also try to switch render. Sometimes it got like frozen. So all we need to do like to wake it up is to switch here some parameters or to just change type of visualization, and eventually it's going to work. So if it doesn't work, still there's some bigger issue, but sometimes it just get freeze. It just freeze the viewport. So you need to change something. Now, this is a white environment. What if we want to have a better environment? Well, we talk about the image that you can apply to the environment, which is called HDRI, and it's used for what is called the image-based lighting. So it's a lighting based on a single image. Now, in this Polyhaven website, we can look for um, outdoor or indoor, depending on our scene. So for example, in this scene, in the specific, we are in outdoor. And then we have like day scenes, night scenes, we have sunsets, dusk, dawn, and so on. So with this image, we can do everything. We can do the background, we can do the lighting, we can develop reflections on reflective materials. So this is why it's so popular, because it's really easy to use. You just need to download the image from there and then just apply it to the dome light. So let's see it again. This is the standard dome light. And when I go in the parameters here, you find the dome multiplier, and make sure it's not too high. And then you have the dome map. In the dome map, we open and apply the HDRI image. Now again, it's looking like too bright. Let's see if something wrong here. That's the sun. We can see the image is there, but it's kind of too bright. So again, try to switch from one view to the other. You can see this is a wireframe. This is solid view, only the 3D model. And then we have the third sphere, which is the material preview, which is already rendering. So now it's looking fine. So again, if something strange happens, just try to switch view or try to switch renderer, and eventually it's going to unlock, it's going to unfreeze, and it's going to work. So this is how it's supposed to look. Doesn't, it's not supposed to look like over bright. So make sure that, you know, if you do everything correctly, that if it's just not frozen. And also the materials are looking fine. We can create our own redshift material, but we can see the materials right away. Now, the only thing we are not seeing is the textures. So we're just seeing like a default gray material. And this is because we need to create the materials in Redshift. Now, you can see I'm going quick with some actions in Blender because I think you know Blender. If you don't know how to use Blender, just check the Blender courses in the channel. Now, you can see this is a texture right here. So all the texture have been downloaded from Sketchfab, but we cannot use them. To use them, again, we need to create a Redshift material. So you can see the texture is there, but it's just not visible in Redshift. So we're gonna talk about materials later, but you can see also here, if I change the color, it just doesn't show if you use the Redshift render. So in the material, just click on Add RS node. That's gonna add these two nodes. One is the output, which is going into the surface, which means into the shader or material. And now if I change this into red, we can see that the color is visible right away. So the redshift material here is just overriding the Blender material. So for each of these objects, we need to change. We can also work with the viewport display here and assign a color, simple color on the viewport, and then like another material for the final render. So we have these two options. So now that we have the dome light, which is kind of the basic light you want to use, and because if you make it really low, it's gonna have like just a nice environment lighting. If you make it pretty high, you can use it also as the sunlight and the skylight in this case. Now we can also go in the transform by selecting the dome and change the Z position, which means it's rotating around the Z, which means is, changing the orientation of the image, which means it's changing also the position of the sun in the image. And you can see that the sun in the images is actually projecting photons and shadows. So again, it's looking like a really nice exterior rendering. So probably the exterior rendering is the easiest thing you can do with the IBL or image-based lighting. Now I'm going to go in the view, I'm going to do frame selected to get closer, and you want to do this every time your camera gets like stuck. You want to frame the object, and that's gonna like reset the camera navigation. Now back in the lights properties. So we have also saturation. You can see how this is affecting everything. So it's kind of doing color correction here, because when we use the dome light affects everything. It affects here, if we change the tint, it affects the color of everything because we're just using one light. So if I change that image-based lighting or change that information parameters inside the HDRI here, it's gonna change everything. So I can make a nice pink tint, I can change the intensity multiplier, I can increase the samples if I want more quality, I can fix the gamma, the exposure. So exposure is really important to change when we are in interior or exteriors, because sometimes we have rendering that are too bright or too dark. So the first thing you can do is adjust the exposure and the intensity of the lighting, of course. And then we have other settings here for the shadows. We can make transparent shadows. Usually they look better than completely opaque shadows. We can activate and deactivate the shadows, turn them on and off. And let's see here what we have. Interesting. Well, most of these are like advanced, so we don't really need them to know right away. And you can see everything else we will not cover in this really quick course. You can see in the manual. So I'm just gonna fix here the intensity multiplier. Now, if you want a night scene, for example, you either get a night HDRI from the web, or you can just decrease the intensity of a day scene and try to simulate a night scenario. Now I've downloaded a lot of HDRI here, so I can try with the night one, which is anyway gonna look better than day one when you decrease the intensity. So here we can increase a little bit because this is a night scene, and you can see how the image is it's gonna affect everything. It's gonna affect the background, and also if I turn off the grid, maybe you can see better. It's gonna affect the background, also the ground, and the reflections. Well, we don't have any reflective material at the moment, but it's going to be reflected on there. It's going to be looking more realistic. And of course, is with one image we are basically setting up an entire lighting system. So let's add another light. This time is going to be an RS physical. And you can see it goes really far away again because it's going into the origin. Well, actually is going into the 3D cursor. So one thing we can do here to fix this thing and not having to change the position of the light every time is just to change the position of the 3D cursor. So I'm just going to position this light, and again is kind of non-visible. So I'm guessing it's again kind of freezing the the render here. So first of all, I want to put the 3D cursor right here for the next time. And so everything I will create is going to go there. And second of all, I need to check here if there is some problem. There you go. If I add another light, it's actually visible. So probably the first one wasn't, for some reason, it wasn't recognized. So all I'm going to do is just restart the render again. And also that light, it looks too bright. So something is wrong. Let's just switch again from like the solid view into the render again. And now it's looking fine. So that's how you fix that issue. If you have it, I don't know. But probably it's an issue of the interactive progressive rendering. So you can see if I change the position of this light, well, that's important. It's not like the dome light that I can position that anywhere. So in the dome light, the only important thing is the rotation. Here, the position is really important. And then we have again the temperature, the color. You can work with temperature like in real life. If you have a higher temperature, you have bluish lights. If you have lower temperature, you have warmer lights and like yellowish or reddish. Or you can use color again, or you can use both if you want. And then we have again the intensity. So of course, if you decrease the intensity, you're gonna have less intensity. If you increase it, you're gonna have more light, more power. But also with the exposure. If you decrease the exposure, you're gonna have less power. If you increase the exposure, you're gonna have more power of that light. You can also use images. You can use, sorry, this unit type. You can use image or any other unit type that you find in reality. And also you have decay, type of decays. So the most realistic one is inverse. Then you have linear, which is decaying, but with a lower speed. And then you have none, which means the light is never gonna decay, so it's gonna go infinitely towards the scene. So the best one here would be the inverse square. But sometimes you want to use the others. If you want to have like more intensity, you can use the linear, and here you can set up also the light of the linear effect with a start and a stop, or beginning and end. And then you also have here possibility to change the shape, because this is basically an area light. Now it's kind of small, it's about 20 centimeters. So I can make it larger. Now I changed the shape into a disc, so it's a circle. So you can make it a rectangle, you can make a square, you can change the size. You can make it normalized, so the size is not gonna affect the intensity. Otherwise, you saw that by changing the side is gonna increase the intensity, and also bidirectional to go both ways, and visible if you want to actually see it in the render as a disk in this case, or as a square in other cases, or if you want to hide it. And then also pretty important, the spread. Now we have this area light, which is pretty small and it has a high spread. If I put a low spread, we can see we have kind of a spotlight effect, kind of a conic light, or you know uh, shooting photons into a cone shape. So if I make the spread smaller and smaller, it gets more and more concentrated. You have more concentrated shadows, more visible shadows, less blurred shadows. And also we can make it like really, really low or at zero, which means it's going to create a concentrated beam of light only affecting a really small area. So it's kind of, a laser beam or something like that. Or again, if we increase the spread, we have more spotlight. If we increase it even more, we have nice area light. Samples to increase the quality, and you have also transparency again of the shadows, and you can turn the shadows on and off. But of course, if you want more realistic results, you want shadows always on. And also we have other settings here, softness, but not in this case. So it only works for certain types of lights. Then we have contribution. Now this is also pretty important. So diffuse is the contribution of the light in the diffuse lining. The reflection is if you don't want to see the light reflected on the surfaces, or you can put, maybe you can lower that down, and then you have transmission, which means on the transparency, and then you have global illumination, scattering, and other effects that usually are part of the materials. So if you don't want to see again the light reflected, you may want to address the reflection and so on. And then you have volumetric effects, and acoustics, which are more advanced. We're gonna have a look at those later on. So let's stay with the basic effects here. So now we have two lights, the dome light, the physical light. Now in the dome light also, you can change here you can use the world environment like in Blender, or you can use the dome light. So if we want to use like a physical effect, so this is a physical sky of the environment, well, we can use that instead of using IBL or image-based lighting using the dome light. We can use a physical sky. Now, physical sky, it's kind of a procedural map, so you can adjust it and fix it right away here in Blender. It's not a texture, it's a like simulation of what happens on a real sky. So we can fix here some of the parameters like the horizon blur, the horizon height, the turbidity, the ozone, the ground color, all that stuff is happening directly in here. We're not changing pixels, we are changing parameters. That's the difference between dome light and HDRI and a physical sky. And we can do red and blue shift. We can adjust the saturation, and so on. For everything else, it works just like an HDRI. Now, if I'm gonna add here also sun, so it's a distant light, well, I'm gonna complete the setting for an exterior. Exterior, if you don't use HDRI, needs at least one sunlight or infinite light or distant light, and one skylight or environment or dome light. So we can see here from the top, this is the distant light, but I don't think it's actually working. So you can see I'm moving it around. It's not important where I position that light, but how I moved it, how I rotate it, just like the dome light. But now I don't see it. So let's again go back and forward here, and now I see it. So you can see it's projecting really long shadows because you know, it's like the sun when it's really near to the ground, it's gonna project really long shadows. Otherwise, it's at the zenith, so it's at the maximum. And if it's like upside down like this, it's not gonna emit light because it means that it's gonna go in night mode. So again, the distant light, it's all about how you rotate it and how you point it. So it doesn't matter where you position the source, it matters where you position that yellow dot, which is kind of the aim of the infinite light. Now, another really cool thing to do is to connect the distant light with the skylight. So if I click on the distant light object, drag it into the sunlight spot inside the skylight. So if I click and drag and drop it in there, now the two are going to be connected, which means that if I change, let's again restart the render. Now, if I change the rotation of that sun, you can see it's also going to affect the background or the physical sky. So this is why the physical sky, together with the physical sun, in this case, we can consider it. It's so interesting because um, we can, you know, move it around, change from day to night, and also we have a beautiful sun representation in there. So that's coming from the skylight or procedural sky. So I can adjust the sun disk intensity, the sun disk scale, the sun disk glow. We can adjust the tint. So if we want to have more sunset, if we want to have more dusk or dawn situation, or if we want to have like also a moonlight, we can perhaps change this into something not warm, but like darker and uh, colder, and that could represent also the moonlight. with the blue tint. So also you see what happens if I push it too high or upside down. Well, the sun is just going to go down the horizon and it's going to become invisible. And so this could be also moon. So if I change here into something again, bluish, could be a colder sun effect or a moon. So let's go for a sunset. It looks better. And it kind of reminds of the redshift render red color. And atmosphere. Also, this is really, really cool. So this is how we can work with volumetric lining. We need to go and activate the atmosphere, and then we need to work with the fog. So if I increase the uh, brightness of the emission of the fog, we're going to start to see some fog effects. We can adjust the height of the fog. We can adjust here the scattering. So let's increase the scattering, increase the attenuation, and there you go. Now we have kind of a misty or also mystery or kind of, science fiction, futuristic, post-apocalyptic in this case, maybe with this red color environment and atmosphere. So we can create more atmosphere. We can create atmospheric effects like scenographics effects. And for the also sun tint, I want to change here a little bit. And also the height, I want to increase the height of the fog. Now I'm seeing now the volumetric effect on the environment. But what if I want to see it on a light like this? So this spotlight we created, kind of a street lamp effect in a misty or foggy day. So we need to go select the lights parameter. We need to go and look for the volume effect. There you go, volume. So just increase, and there you go. We're starting to have a nice volumetric effect. Again, really cool for, I don't know, science fiction, horror movies, or mystery movies, noir. And it works perfectly with the fog or mist effect. You can create a lot of dramatic scenarios with this for movies or TV shows and so on. And again, I'm gonna also activate it in this other light right here. So the contribution for the volume can be adjusted if you want a more intense or less intense. And now I want to add for the glass there, I want to add redshift material by clicking on add the RS node. And I'm going to go in the shading interface. So this is the material here. Now to create a glass is pretty simple. All we need to do is go in the transmission here and just change the weight. Weight means how much you want of that effect. So 100 or 1 transmission means the top. We don't want the roughness to see through nicely in the glass. And you want to make sure that you have a thin glass in there or a thin geometry. Otherwise, it's going to look like a big block of glass. So we don't want that. We want a thin panel of glass. And now we can see also in the inside, we can see the light can get through. This is why it's called transmission, because the lights go through that material, go through that object and go in the inside, in the indoor. So another thing I can do also here, you can see add, and we have materials. So we have other types of materials. If we want to do, what I want to do here is create a RS incandescent. So this is kind of a emissive effect. That's another way you can create lights in Redshift. You can just assign an emissive material like this again to the surface in the output. You can change the color. You can also change you can make images projecting lights like Texas. So you can apply Texas to emission, or you can apply Texas anywhere, but we're going to talk about materials and Texas later. We can see we have so many different types of materials in here that we can use. So we have also like architectural or architecture, that's another one. And again, I click and drag, substitute the link in the surface, change color here, and increase the weight of the illumination. And again, it's gonna create kind of a neon light effect. So you can apply it on text, you can apply it on windows if you don't want to show the indoor. Otherwise, you just need to add indoor lights. Now I'm gonna do some examples also for artificial lights and indoor lights in this case, not only like outdoors. Well, of course, you can use the area light, the physical area light of Redshift to simulate spherical lights, circular lights, and all the others. But I'm just gonna make a couple of more example here. So now we are inside, and we can see we don't have too much light. To have more light coming from the outdoor into the indoor, we can use another type of light, which is called the portal light. Portal light need to be placed outside the window. They should have the same size of the opening, so whether it's a door or a window. And let me just click here and divide the interface, because we probably now need like more views to handle this better. So I'm just going to render with one view, and the other two I will set them as a wireframe so we can see better how we are positioning lights. And we're only going to leave this view on the top left to preview the render. So also, if we have a smaller portion of the screen, rendering is going to be faster and less heavy. So I'm going to add a light, portal light. So that's the portal light. Is looking like an area light at the beginning. So all we need to do is position it again outside a window, rotate it vertically, because usually that's the way we're going to project light in a indoor space with the area, sorry, the portal light, which again looks like an area light. You can see it has dimensions, so we can fix the dimensions. We want to bring it again just outside that window, and we can start to see the effect. So it's going to help basically, well, let's increase the intensity. It's going to help the environment light to get into the indoor. So this is not an actual area light, it's a portal. So it's just kind of replicating the colors of the image that we use as HDRI images. So you see, if I change this into a standard light, it's gonna be way brighter. If I make this a portal, it's gonna be more hidden, and it's not gonna be visible also, because again, portal light just have to, increase the effect of the light coming from the outside. So we can copy this, we can increase the intensity multiplier, but the best way to increase the intensity of a portal light is to increase the intensity of the light outside the scene. So I'm just resetting here to see it better. Let me just, show you here. And yeah, it's showing. So I'm gonna add the final light, which is gonna be the IES light. And the IES is basically an effect more than a light. Is simulating a more realistic spotlight, and that's perfect for interiors. If you want to see this pretty good, you need to position this near a wall or near, some 3D model. Otherwise, it's not going to be so visible. Be careful it's not in the floor when you insert it. Be careful that is not inside the ceiling. It needs to be exactly you know, near a ceiling and near a wall, but not inside. So you can see there that I'm using the other views to help myself position that exactly where it's actually in the scene. So if I again restart, and we need to make it visible by going here in the IES profile. We need to get an IES profile, and I have a folder here where I have saved some IES profiles. So we need to have that in order to see the IES spot properly. Now make sure you don't use an image like PNG, is not going to work. So we're not going to see anything here. If we change the multiplier or anything, we're not going to see anything. So what we want to do is, well, let's first restart. There you go, because there was too much light in there. And then we want the IES file format. So use that. And now it's extremely bright. So we need to start to decrease the intensity. So somehow it just came so bright. So restart again if nothing is looking like it's supposed to, and then start to change the intensity. Maybe we want to take off the fog or atmosphere. Sometimes that could cause too much brightness. Or here in the contribution, we can increase the diffuse contribution. So now we can see. And if it's too reflect, if we see it in the reflection, we don't want to see it, we can decrease the reflection. And again, let's address the multiplier and the exposure. Now there is also an exposure due to the camera, which is also pretty useful. So we're gonna see that later. But now we can start to see the effect of that IES. You can also change the IES profile if you want. And so just keep on fixing things until you can see the actual IES effect, which is, again, a more realistic cone of light. You can also make it darker with a darker color, so it looks not so bright. And well, that's it. So let's try with another one, maybe with a more concentrated one, we can see it better. Okay, now we don't see anything, so let's increase again the intensity multiplier. Now we will continue to talk a little bit about exposure, lights, and so on also in the next. And this is just a website you can use. You can donate also. You can use to download some of free IES profiles. So just download it, extract the folder, and just place it in there. This is where I'm getting these IES files. And now I can make this brighter because it's not looking too much bright. So I'm just going to increase this intensity multiplier and the color again until I see it. So every time is, a matter of adjusting based on the situation. And then you can start to create copies and copy the light everywhere you see the actual spotlight in the ceiling there in this scene, but of course you can create your own. So this will be all for this video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to stay updated. Join the channel if you want to support us. Check our other courses in Blender, Redshift, Cinema for Redshift, and so on. Thanks for watching. See you in the next.